Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 262nd episode of Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter or on Threads at Hawk Blogger. Yes, we are back. The Intrepid crew has returned from a nice little summer break to talk Seahawks, which we will eventually do. But since we haven't seen each other for a while, we will probably talk about other things for at least a few minutes. Let me bring everybody in. First of all, Dayna O'Gorman at Dayna OG on Twitter. Are you also at Dayna OG on Threads?
It might be the Dayna OG because I think that's what my
The
Instagram
Dayna
was under.
OG.
Well, I think that's what my Instagram was under. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So, Dayna, you did a little traveling this summer, yes? Where'd you go?
The whole month of June, I was not home for more than 5 days in a row at all between Memorial Day and like the 10th of July. It was crazy. But yes, I did a fun little trip to Austin to go to a concert, and then we did a couple of lake weekends, and then I did get to go to Scotland and Ireland for a couple of weeks, which was an amazing trip. I recommend, if you can, to head over that
Had
direction.
You been?
We had been to Edinburgh a couple of times, but we had never been to the Highlands. So that's where we went, was the Scottish Highlands. And then we went, we did a tour. We went all around Ireland, including Northern Ireland, which was very cool. So that was really nice. And we hadn't been there before. So yeah.
Did you stay in Inverness?
No, we didn't stay in
visit?
Inverness. Yeah, we stayed in a little tiny village called Bankery, which is out not too far from Balmoral. And so we were in Aberdeen, and then we went up that direction, but we didn't stay there. No, but it's very cool. It's so beautiful. Scotland is everything I thought Ireland would look like, and Ireland didn't really look like that as much. But Scotland, it was just gorgeous. So yeah,
that sounds amazing. Well. Yeah. We are happy to have you back and happy to see you. And especially for folks that didn't already see Dayna, this is her second podcast of the night. The queen of Seahawks podcasting is at it again. Next, you heard him already, Evan Hill at Evan Hill HB on Twitter. And have you gotten on Threads yet?
I have. And I sent out some like sassy tweets about Elon Musk, I think, or I guess threads about Elon Musk or whatever we call them nowadays.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be honest with you. Like I want Threads to succeed so badly, but there's just like some core product like flaws from an offering perspective that just make it like untenable for me right now. So I'm going to hold the username over there, but you know, Twitter has a certain level of toxicity and brain poisoning that I feel like we're all at least I'm like addicted to. So I don't know if that will translate to Threads, but
yes. Yeah, I see a question in the chat about what is Threads. So if you haven't heard, everyone's been trying to come up with Twitter competitors since Twitter started going downhill. And one that is finally a legitimate contender has emerged. It is from Meta, formerly Facebook, and more officially, it is from Instagram. And it is basically allows you to build off your Instagram account to create a Threads account, and Threads is essentially like a Twitter knockoff. And as far as I know, was also built by a lot of the former Twitter engineers and product folks and stuff like that. So I think people basically went from Twitter to Threads and then just spent 5 months rewriting the same stuff they had written at Twitter. And so, I mean, it's passable. It's passable, but you know, when you've already kind of established a community in one platform, it's really hard. And I think a lot of folks use Instagram differently than they use Twitter. So I don't think their audiences are necessarily the same. So there's a lot of barriers, but if you haven't already, I would recommend going over to Threads and grabbing username. I thought about telling my oldest son to go start poaching a bunch of usernames and then using it as a way to get a foot in the door for interviews for social media jobs at various companies. Like, hey, I grabbed this for you. Let's talk. But he hasn't done that yet. Jeff, real Jeff Simmons is here as well. We are really happy to see Jeff. Jeff, have you gone on Threads yet?
I have not, actually. I asked the same question to you guys in the chat. I did not know what Threads was. I'd been kind of off the social media grid for a bit. I got that rate limit thing a bunch of times, and that's when I realized how addicted to Twitter I am. And I was pretty rattled by that. So I am not on Threads. I am one of the few guys of my friend group who doesn't have Instagram. I had Instagram years ago, and I hated it.
Yeah.
So I absolutely hated it. And Twitter's good enough for me. And no, I haven't tried to find that next version yet. I like Twitter as much as it drives me crazy. It's just part of my routine at this point.
It is pretty remarkable how shitty they've made Twitter, and I still have not left it. I mean, that's pretty good lock-in for a company that has not been able to figure out a business model all these years. And I can't say I outright refuse, but I generally have like, I'm not going to pay them. I'm not interested in paying them. And if they got to the point where I had to pay or leave Twitter, I might pay. I don't know. That'll be the ultimate question. But I mean, it breaks pretty much every day at this point. So
isn't there a golden rule of business where it's like you don't charge for something that was like previously permanently free or something, like without changing it or something like that?
Like the Facebook movie or something. There's like a line about that.
It just feels weird. Like they've made so many drastic negative changes in the past year.
Bad.
The one thing I will say that I think does have the potential to legitimately kill Twitter is if those rate limits returned for any sort of sustained period, that will fuck everything.
That was insane. We will not make this a whole podcast about Twitter, but that definitely in my outside of Seahawks life and just talking tech and product management was like, why are you limiting people from experiencing your product?
Exactly.
This seems like only bad.
Especially for a product that like it monetizes like eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
Like with advertisements.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense.
It's bizarre. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Dayna, who is going to host tonight. I have been, my summer has been high school graduation for my youngest son, college graduation for my oldest son, anniversary, birthdays, like traveling back and forth across the country a few times. I've been really out of it. I've never hit the Twitter rate limit because I barely have been on Twitter. So I am entrusting Dayna to actually guide us through a worthwhile conversation because God knows I'm not the one to do it right now. So where does we start, Dayna?
So here's the thing everyone needs to know. I said, guys, when is our first show back? Because I was trying to get a couple of weeks set up. And Brian's like, is there anything to talk about? I was like, really? So I was like, yeah, I got this. No worries. Because there's plenty to talk about. I think the most important thing to talk about right first, though, you guys, tomorrow those throwbacks come out. I have not been this excited about something so menial. I'm so excited for these damn jerseys. And I'm not a jersey buyer. I have a Richard Sherman jersey. That's it. I don't buy a ton of them. And I cannot wait to get my hands on them. There's been a lot of concern that there's not going to be enough silver. I keep seeing there's not enough silver. There's not enough silver. We don't know. We have no idea what they look like. So I think I know the helmets will be silver, but am I just dumb? I'm so excited. Jeff, are you excited at all? But these jerseys are you typical Jeff where you're like, meh, it's good.
It's such a boring point of the offseason. Like,
we'll take it.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
I'm tired of these lists and like having.
We're talking about the lists. Lists are dumb.
It's list season right now because you're in the dead zone. But like the first I do have a bunch of Seahawks jerseys. The first one I got was a Joey Galloway one from that era,
wow.
And I think that was in like 1999. So. Yeah, I'm kind of excited. I've been hoping those jerseys would come back for a couple of years now, and there was some rule about because they had that wolf gray or the puke green jersey, they couldn't bring in another one. But I'm actually excited for this one. It's such a boring part of
but it's different, right? I just keep like, finally, we have a little something different. I think I think it's important. I don't know.
Now,
I'm jacked.
Now, is it just for one game that they're like bringing it back for, or is it like
That's
a
all
series
they've
of
announced.
games?
That's all they've announced. So I don't know if it's replacing the lime green. I don't know if it's replacing the wolf gray. Like, I don't know that, but I think they've only announced just the one game against the Browns that they'll wear it in. So, which then the Browns released their all whites today, which I thought were really sharp too. So it could be, I don't know, it could be fun.
Yeah,
Brian's like, I could give touche. He doesn't care.
I'm just honestly, I was trying to think like, how different are the Browns throwback jerseys? Like, I think
They've worn the same jerseys.
they're pretty much the same, aren't
Yeah, they came out with an all white, so they have a white helmet and a
But is
white.
that what they're gonna
top.
wear in our throwback game? Because that's not.
Oh.
No, I think it's a totally different week. I think it's
Yeah.
like against Cincinnati.
Oh, the chat's telling us it's the games against the Browns and the Cowboys.
Oh, wow. It's a Thursday.
I'm in. I'm so excited. All right, we don't have to talk about that anymore. Are you going to buy one? All of you?
maybe a Youth XL.
Although a DK Metcalf, I think that if you're gonna go throwback, you've got to go the most modern type of player and athlete on your current team. Something that's a contrast. So like a Geno Smith throwback, I don't think that's the way. But like a DK Metcalf throwback or a Devin Witherspoon or something that's like super youthful, super elite athlete that didn't exist back then, that would be pretty sweet. I could see that.
Okay, so can I ask a question then? Who would be the most underrated jersey buy right now that is like not a mainstream, Seahawks household name
On the Seahawks?
on the Seahawks? So like,
I mean, I like an Abe Lucas. The offensive linemen have long tenures, so those can last a while.
I don't know. I'm a little obsessed with Mike Morris right now.
I was going to say Mike Morris.
No.
Really?
I want to know. I know a little bit
hilarious.
about Dana's. Why, Evan? What's your Mike Morris obsession?
Hasn't the coaching staff been like hyping him up to a whole nother level that he's just like a god, basically? I don't remember the quotes, but like I just remember reading the quotes and I was like, oh shit, it's the Tedrick Thompson era all over again. I'm so excited. Not actually, but
Yeah.
What's the hit rate for coaches hyping up Seahawks that end up being good?
Well, Christine Michael supposedly had an awakening. Do you
He
remember
wasn't
that?
horrible.
Did he have an awakening?
I don't know. He had like a five over 5 yards of carry. I don't know. Not an awakening, maybe. No.
Tedrick Thompson.
Yeah.
That was more of the players.
Really?
Were there others that the coaching staff is like hyped to an ungodly level in like the past like 8 or 9 years?
Drew Lock.
Trey Flowers. Trey Flowers got a lot of coach hype.
Trey Flowers did. You're
Trey
right.
Flowers
Good
is
call.
He was so bad.
It was so bad.
Is he even in the league anymore?
I think so.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's in the
yeah.
Bengals.
He won
like-
a Super Bowl.
As a starter?
No, he was,
Yeah, no, he didn't start, but he won a Super Bowl with the Bengals.
Shit.
No,
Wait, the
they
Bengals
lost.
didn't win a Super Bowl. He made the Super Bowl.
Made the Super Bowl. Did I say win? Sorry.
Yeah.
You guys.
I
said
wish the
win over
Bengals
here.
won.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Oh,
All right, I'm excited.
Somebody said Blair. Blair Walsh was probably.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
bad.
God.
That is
Right.
true. All right, so let's go. I want to know because Evan, I'm going to start with you on this one because you've been real excited. You've been kind of hyped, kind of worked up. So the off season, I want kind of your general thoughts. I'm going to ask each one of you. I want kind of general thoughts. The off season, I mean, you can throw the draft in there if you want to, but we kind of already talked about that. More of like, has there been a building hype? Are you more excited? Are you starting to get a little nervous? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic right now. I think they've added a lot of reinforcements in key areas. Offensive line, they threw a couple of positions at the draft in free agency. They brought in that guy from the Lions, so they kind of have like a 4-way competition going between center and right guard right now. Left tackle is really solid. If we expect a year 2 jump from Charles Cross, Damian Lewis at left guard, Abe Lucas at right tackle. If we get that center or right guard position like stabilized, potentially even both, that offensive line could be the best unit on this football team, and they might be already positionally. So I'm really excited about what they did on the trenches on the offensive side of the ball. I think the defensive line is still a really big question mark. They lost a lot of rotational pieces. Quinn Jefferson, Poona Ford, there's more names they lost. I don't think I was more like materially negative, like a couple of months ago, but I'm starting to talk myself into the hope of the unknown that maybe they're a little bit better in run defense than we expect. But I think there's a big question mark there. Draymond Jones will obviously have to show up. He got paid an absolute bag this past offseason, something like $17 million a year. 17. That's big money. That's like tier one. He better be a, every Sunday sort of producer, run stopper. I'm just looking across the roster here. Obviously, defensive back wise, we're absolutely loaded there. Julian Love is a name that I think he gets lost in the crowd in the mix a little bit, and he could end up being a really, core contributor defensively, especially if Jamal Adams goes down, in that unfortunate scenario. So, we're expecting him to be, I think, healthy this year, but there's exciting talent that they've added. Zach, how do you say his last name before I butcher? Is it Charbonnet? Charbonnet. May end up being a low-key producer, somebody to be excited about. Obviously, JSN on the wide receiver side, there's solid reinforcements all around. But I think if Seattle's going to make a deeper playoff run this next year, they need big second-year steps from some key contributors they had last year. I think Geno needs to have the same or better type of year. Frankly, he had a slope towards the end of last year. Would love to see that not happen this year. So they've got the tools, but that's kind of where my head's at.
Is Julian Love's floor Bradley McDougald?
Oh,
I think it's higher.
His floor is higher than that.
Yeah, I think he's a better player.
I do too. So you think his floor is higher than that. So what's his floor?
Trying to think of someone a little more versatile.
Because I think of him as a no-name, acquisition for the most part, cheap acquisition, who became a solid starter for the Seahawks. And I agree with Evan. Julian Love I think we all are pretty high on what he can be. I mean, captain for the Giants, played every friggin' position in the secondary, young, and I'm trying to set I'm in the trying to set my expectations low category. So I'm trying to think what's realistically
so surprising
worst case scenario. But yeah. Anyway.
What about Walter Thurman? What about peak Walter Thurman?
Oh, I loved him.
Dude, if that's his floor, that'd be sweet.
I see a lot of similarities there.
I think you're right, though. It's not a name that gets talked about a ton. I think that has to do with the rookie class, from last year and this year. People are so focused on how well that was done that they forget a little bit about some of these acquisitions. I'm not going to lie. I pulled up the roster a few weeks ago just to kind of look at it. I was getting together to write some stuff, and it was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Jaron Reed. How terrible is that? I had just forgotten that he was on the team.
Well, that's kind of forgettable.
Well, but I mean, it's a name I know, you know what I mean? And so I was just I was surprised. So I think that's just it. I think there's been such a focus on these new young guys, which they totally deserve. But I think that the Julian Loves get kind of mixed into that a little bit. Jeff, why don't you let us know what you think about the offseason? Are you optimistic? Are you nervous? Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm starting to hit that nervous. Oh crap, we're too happy about this. Kind of like we were about the secondary a couple of years ago.
See, I'm not nervous really at all. There's obviously, Evan touched on a lot of the issues with the roster, and I think they are very similar roster-wise to where Seattle was. I hate when we make these callbacks to other Seahawks teams, but in 2012, I think the roster is in a really similar spot where they had they're one offseason away from being a contender. And 2012, they didn't have a pass rush other than really Chris Clemens. And it was a glaring hole in the team. They lost in the playoffs because they couldn't really get home. And the next year they signed Averill and Bennett, and they went to the Super Bowl. I don't know if they're on that path, but all throughout the roster, I thought they had a really, really good offseason. And Evan touched on it. They have position groups that could have best in the league ceiling. Their wide receiver group, best in the league ceiling. With them and the Bengals are probably the top, and there might be another one I'm missing. Their secondary, even if Jamal Adams doesn't play, he's almost house money at this point. They have so many guys like Mike Jackson and Trey Brown. They're 5 deep at corner. They haven't been like that since 2013, really. And if you remember what the group we were talking about a couple of years ago when they were trying out like Trey Flowers, and you're hoping for recoveries from like the guy Witherspoon they had from who went to Pittsburgh, Akella Witherspoon. Like they're starting to build really sustainable position groups. Their offensive line, Brandon Thornton, who came out as one of the offensive line experts in the league, he had them ranked in the top 10, which I thought was pretty astonishing, even though I really like if some of these rookies hit. Anthony Bradford was a guy me and Brian were really, really excited when they drafted. And then Olu was a guy who could have easily been a second or third round pick. If one of those or two of those rookies hit, I read today they're 32nd in the league in offensive line spending. And if you hit on 4 rookies or even 3, so they really have these position groups. The edge rush group is okay. And then the running back room could be really good. It's probably, obviously, you're seeing in the league, it's the least valuable position. So I'm not that stressed because I don't see them as a contender yet. I see them as that second tier in the NFC, which is pretty weak right now. So there's San Francisco, there's Philly, and then there's sort of that mixed mash of Detroit and Dallas, Seattle. And like you heard Louis Riddick and you heard his opinion where he said this is just this big monster coming. They have these 2 rookie classes. And there's a lot of people in the league that feel that way. I still think they have that glaring hole and it's going to make it hard. So that I see them as a year away, but I think there's just a lot of good things happening. And they have so many good young players emerging and their roster is really ascending at a good level. And like Evan said, it really comes down to everything's set up for Geno. He's got the offensive line. He's got the running backs. He's got the receivers, the tight ends. If he can maintain the level he showed in the first half, or as Brian talked about, even take a step, which there's reasons he could, this team's set up to be really, really good. I don't think they're San Francisco good, but I think they're going to be like a really good team, and there's going to be young players, so I think there's going to be ups and downs, and so I'm pretty optimistic right now. I haven't quite hit the Dayna level. Maybe once I see that defensive line, I might change, but we'll see.
I don't want to say I'm not optimistic because I am. Like, I'm excited about the pieces, but it worries me when I'm not the only one who's positive. When other people start getting positive, I'm like, oh God, here we go. Anyway, I'll get over it, I'm sure. Brian, I want to ask you, so there was some talk, Shelby Harris, Jeff and I in the chat. I was like, Shelby Harris tweeted this and he had these eyes. I'm like, maybe he's going to come back. He's like, or maybe he's going to sign for another team. I'm like, shush. So do you think so? Other than that, so obviously Shelby Harris is still sitting out there, but him or any others, do you see them adding anyone else without an injury happening, obviously, because then they have, holes to fill, but do you see them going out and grabbing anyone else?
I don't think they have the money to really grab anyone else. Fair. I think they're pretty strapped in that regard. And I would be shocked if they have enough money to sign someone like Shelby Harris. I think just people make the mistake sometimes of thinking because he's available and he's a vet that he's going to be super, super cheap. Mm-hmm. A lot of times those kinds of vets like the Ndamukong Suhs in the past, they're just waiting towards later in camp. They don't want to go to camp. And then they sign their $5, $6, $7, $8 million single year deal. And they're fine with that. Seahawks don't have space for that kind of deal. And even like $1 to $2 million is going to be tough right now. So I think we have what we're going to have for the most part. And I don't know, Dayna, I guess I get excited when I think a team can win a Super Bowl. I don't really think this is a team that is like it maybe in like, if you look at like error bars statistically at like the farthest, most positive, optimistic, and the most negative, is there some world and scenario where this Seahawks team could win a Super Bowl? I think so. But I think it's pretty slim, like, 2 out of 100 kind of slim, or 1 out of 100 maybe even. But if I step back and say like, where is this team in its progression? Kind of like what Jeff was saying, I think there's a reasonable case to be made that it's realistic for the Seahawks to have a top 5 offense this year. And I think it's maybe even realistic for them to be a top 3 offense this year. And it might be even realistic for the Seahawks to score the most points that they've ever scored in franchise history. Like, I think the offense can be really, really good. I'm not saying it's going to be, and I'm predicting that. But I think if Geno's what I think Geno's going to be, if that offensive line takes a step forward, if the running backs are who they should be, if the receivers, I think we can talk about it. Everyone else in the world But Jackson Smith and Jigba combined with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf is lethal. And then that makes the tight ends, who are also pretty good. I don't think they're elite, but they're pretty good. Like, that's one of the better tight end groups the Seahawks have had, and they aren't even in the conversation at all. So I think that it's hard to find real holes with that group. And so that maybe is as much as I want, and I'm so fixated on the fact that I just cannot stand seeing our team get run over again, and that it seems like there's a decent chance that might happen again on defense. If they can be a top 5 offense and really look like they're on the come there, then this team will probably have done what it needed to do this year.
So finish that thought for me. So you have a top 5 offense. Where does the defense have to land to not get run over? Are we thinking mid-pack? You thinking top 50? You know, where are you thinking that they have to be in order to somewhat complement that top 5 offense?
I think we sometimes go about that the wrong. Well, maybe I don't know if that applies as much this year. I don't think it's about where they rank in points allowed. I think it's about whether they can have specific strengths. Can they be a defense that creates turnovers? So you can be a defense that allows a fair amount of points or yards, but if Witherspoon, ends up being what we want him to be and is turning the ball over, Tariq Woolen already was someone who's taking the ball away. Kobe Bryant created, we never even talk about him anymore. Anyway, so like if they can create turnovers and be opportunistic, plus having a really lethal offense, that could be enough, even if they give up a fair amount. If they can be a team that somehow possibly does not get run on that much, then that, honestly, the whole ceiling for this team this year may be about run defense. Like it's really mundane, but if they can just be not the worst possible run defense, that might be enough for the offense to do what they need to do. So I don't know. If I was to bundle it up, maybe it's a top 20 points allowed, I think makes you at least a contender if you've got a top 5 scoring offense.
Yeah, so this was interesting. I was just pulling up some data from actually field goals. Seattle's 2022 defense was ranked third worst in giving up the most big plays allowed. And more than half of that, so that's rushes over 10 yards, passes over 20 yards, and Seattle was top 5 in rushes, big plays. Biggest rush played allowed. I can't. Yeah. You get what I'm saying. It's not. I want to be clear. I'm excited about other parts of the roster, but it's very possible this group is worse this year.
Yeah.
And I might even go further and say it's likely. We should expect them to be worse. Unless there's like material jumps that, we don't expect from players, or somebody shows up, in an unexpected way. But if you look at what they did in the offseason, who they released, I know those rotational players weren't great, but who do we replace them with?
Dayna, you look so perplexed by that.
No, I was reading the depth chart. I don't think they can be worse. Okay, first of all,
I don't either.
Yeah, I don't think they can be worse. I think when you're looking at this, that is our recent pessimism sneaking in just a little bit. If nothing else, flat out, the linebacker group got better. Now, is Bobby who he was? No. Is he the leader they need? Yes. Can he be helpful? Absolutely. Is he going to be what he was? No, of course not. We get that, right? But they did lose some players, but then they did focus on that defense a little bit. And it's interesting is the big plays, they spent some energy in the secondary, right? And so maybe that was in response to that. I'm not really sure, but I don't look at this group and see them worse. Do I see them maybe the same? Maybe close to the same. But I also think that there is, like we've talked about, Quandre Diggs is going to be healthier. He was not himself until really the last part of the season. And you guys know I'm still waiting for my Pick 6 Quandre. But, so I don't think that they're going to be worse. I think that that's That's nerves creeping in a little bit. Jeff, you agree?
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys they lost, because even Al Woods, he didn't play a lot of the second half of the year last year. Most of the guys they lost weren't really good run defenders, at least, and they weren't the ones who were in the past weren't being schemed properly. Like Puna had been a good run defender in the past, and the way he was used last year just played completely against his strength. So I would like to hope that the coaches will make an adjustment. I heard that Sean Desai was in charge of a lot of schemes, and I'm curious what they do with Clint Hurd and what they do up front. Other than Al Woods, there weren't a lot of good run defenders they lost. And so I'm not going to get into like the Jamal or Quandre, because most of the losses they had in the run game were at the line of scrimmage and getting blown off the ball. So I think a year of film and a year of trying to scheme a little differently will just help them. I think you can scheme around them differently. But I think like overall, the players they added, probably the run defense, I don't think will be that much of a glaring. I know talent-wise, they did lose a lot there. And you can probably argue that maybe interior defensive line, they got worse in terms of like pass rushing. Quentin Jefferson, really good interior pass rusher. Shelby Harris, really good interior pass rusher. Puna Fort in the right scheme. But there's not a lot of good run defenders there. And I think Reed and Cam Young, I think some of those guys can just at least fill holes and like do things a little better than some of the other guys. As from an interior pass rush perspective, they could be, if Draymond Jones gets hurt or isn't playing well, they are super thin there in terms of like interior rush. That could be a glaring issue that hasn't been talked about a lot.
Two things. I'm emotionally traumatized by the Raiders game still. Okay. So that is burned into my memory. Josh Jacobs breaking away for another 80-yard run or whatever the fuck in overtime. So I want you to know I'm still processing that, and my brain may not be fully logical. So I have experienced trauma. Okay. Number two, I cannot believe the Seahawks let Quinn Jefferson walk this offseason. That broke me.
Jaron Reed will always be better than Quentin Jefferson. Like you just.
I love that came full circle.
That bothered me so much.
I don't know that people know how much Jaron Reed and Quentin Jefferson have been subject of like an unreasonable amount of chatter in Real Hawk Talk chat has been around Quentin Jefferson and Jaron Reed.
That's like lore in our circle.
Right in the middle of defensive line.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I feel like years have been wasted on that conversation for sure.
That's where we are, right? Though we just spend the time on these mediocre guys that have such low ceilings. And what
they paid Jaron Reed when they brought him back this year?
Too much, like $4 million, maybe
4 million or something.
4.5, maybe.
Just too much.
I mean, he's not that good. I've been the proponent of Jaron Reed relative to these guys, especially Evan, who thinks he's like the worst player to ever walk the face of the earth. The guy did have, a couple years. He had 10.5 sacks 1 year. I mean, you could poo-poo it all you want, but not a lot of interior linemen ever do that. And he's been all right. I think he had another year where he had like maybe 6 sacks or something. I can't remember, but and he's a decent run defender, whatever. Quinn Jefferson for me is just all flash, never actually produces. Like he can't tackle anybody. So he gets in the backfield, but then never brings anybody down. So, and he's also an awful run defender. So anyway, whatever.
It's what they've started. This is what we do.
Have a good defensive line. I want them to be the badasses. I want them to beat other people up. I don't want to listen to fucking 49ers go on their shows during the offseason bragging about how they ran the same fucking play over and over against us and how easy it was and how much they just dominated us. I fucking don't want that anymore. I am sick of having that be my team that's linked to my identity and my self-worth get freaking run over. I am sick of it. So that's what I don't want.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Grant Cohn has picked the Seahawks to win the division and for the 49ers to fall apart. So,
we need to bring him on the pod. Grant Cohen is like the best Seahawks. He's the best Seahawks blogger and podcaster out there right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
awesome. It would be
I've taken a complete 180 on him. He's now become one of my favorite guys on Twitter.
Oh my god, we all have to get physical security though, like before we do that podcast.
I don't think Grant Cohen and Evan can be on the same place in the podcast at any time because they're the same person.
It would make me so happy.
Spider-Man gif where they're both pointing at each other.
Like he just triggers his own fan base, like more than anybody else. The way that Evan does that with the Seahawks Twitter. So
the way he trolls Kyle Shanahan is unbelievable.
So true.
I know.
All right.
I would love to hear Evan and Grant Cohen argue about Kyle Shanahan and Pete Carroll inversely. Like Evan would be like just drooling over Kyle Shanahan, and Cohen would be drooling over Pete Carroll, and Evan would be like, "What do you mean he sucks? Pete Carroll's the worst." It would be hilarious. I would enjoy that.
Oh my gosh.
I love how we totally struck a nerve though with you, Brian. I could see anger like populating on your face. I love that. I love it when you get angry. It brings me joy.
Carolina game.
There's literally nothing that is more frustrating to me than a bad run defense. Like my team having, like that is the worst. I hate it.
Yeah, it's taking a spine out of your back.
Yeah.
God, you guys have listeners. You have no idea how much we talk about this. All right, so here's the thing. I want to know. So I know additions. You guys don't really think that there's any room for additions. There seems to be a conversation going on Twitter, though, about who the surprise cut is going to be. Jeff, do you have any idea, looking at the roster, who the one that fans are going to be not happy about that's going to get cut? If any.
I don't know if there is one. Let me think about it for a second.
Okay. What about Evan?
I thought I had a name, but I misjudged which contract year he was in. I'll say his name for next year. I think Will Dissly could get cut next year.
Oh, he's 100% getting cut next year.
Yeah.
He's making like $10 million. His whole contract.
He'll get restructured. He's not going to get cut.
We just don't really have that guy. Like
I know.
Pretty obvious right now.
The problem is we don't really. Well, this isn't a problem, but like we don't have a ton of like. Maybe Noah Fant, like on a different deal or something, like cut and I don't know.
Kind of.
I've got a few I'd put in that category. I'm just looking through here right now. So one that I think a training camp star people are going to fall in love with and likely will get cut. I'm going to go with Jake Bobo, unrestricted free agent from UCLA, receiver, tall receiver, slow as molasses, but I think is a pretty productive player. So I think he could be one of those guys that flashes and people are upset when he gets cut. Another guy, I'm going to go out there on a limb. I don't know how much guaranteed money Devin Bush has. I have a question mark there. That would be a shocker for most people, partially because one of my training camp sleepers is Vi Jones. I think Vi Jones is an interesting linebacker to watch. I also, as everyone knows, am a fan of Mr. Radigan, and I'll be curious to see how he plays during the preseason.
He was injured last season, right? I think
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
He came back from injury.
Yeah.
And then there was one other person I was thinking about. Who was it? Yeah,
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
D. Eskridge. I don't think it's likely, but Eskridge's issue has been an inability to get on the field, and they essentially replaced him. He was brought in to be the third receiver, the slot receiver. He's been replaced with a first-round pick. So his ceiling in the program is already low. I know Geno's been working out with him and hyping him up, but if he comes out and gets injured again and can't practice throughout training camp and just can't get on the field, that could be a scenario where they just walk away. He's got one more year after this. They have the depth to replace him. I don't see it as likely, but again, if he's not healthy again and he's going through the same stuff as last year, where he pulls a hammy the first day and he's out running on the side, I could see them walking away.
We did have already a surprise cut on the Seahawks roster. The first few letters of Tariq Woolen's name. I have not yet adjusted to the fact that he is officially on the roster as Reek Woolen, R-I-Q.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, hold up. Really important observation. Jake Bobo looks exactly like Justin Herbert. These two, have we ever seen these two men in the same room together?
Don't know.
They are identical.
Thanks for that,
football
Evan.
analysis for you.
Anything more you want to add?
Thrilling.
They both have lush, like sweaty, gross hair that goes super far back. They have the exact same mustache, the exact same facial hair, close to the same eyebrows, exact same eyes, and they're both like 6'4".
Thank God we have our own tray to do editing and cut this part of the pod out.
Look this up. Google this on images. I'm dead ass serious.
All right. I want to talk about Geno
God,
for
he
just.
does.
Oh my God. We're moving on, boys. Come
They're the
on.
He does look like him.
That's what I'm saying.
Dayna, take control.
Oh, lower of Evan. Yeah, you've never been able to do it. How can I do it? All right. So here's the thing. I want to talk about Geno for a couple of minutes because, as we know, he was such a great surprise last year, right? And everyone was so impressed with him and everything that he did and comeback player and all that other good stuff. Then in came everyone who's like, but it's only been 1 year, so let's see if he can manage to do it again. And that negativity comes in again. I will tell you that I followed Geno on social media and he is working his tail off, right? And so I am feeling really good about Geno. I don't think last year was a flash in the pan. Do any of you have any reservations about him at all?
Define reservations. Who are you pointing at, Brian?
You.
Who are you pointing at?
The guy sweating in Arizona.
Well, that would be because he still has a special place in his heart for number 3. And we understand that, but
and Drew Lock.
It's true.
He also loves Drew Lock.
Evan, what's wrong with you? For God's sake. No, I'm just kidding. So why? What are these reservations?
So let me just say this. The contract came in way more friendly than I expected. And,
which is good.
And I'm super comfortable with the deal he's on. Let me start off by saying that. I think it's like, if you look at values contract-wise in the NFL, I think it's one of the best value contracts in the NFL across all positions, especially at quarterback. Yes, he played really well last year. He was a totally different player. We saw accuracy and things about him or things from him that we've never seen before. But it still was only 1 year. So could he do it again this year? Yes. But let's not forget that the first 8 games from Geno last year were in some measures on a historic pace, breaking records. So expecting that to repeat from a player who had his first real good material year, in his 30s, I just don't want to forget about that. I think that's important context. So it's not as hot takey as you think, but it's just, I don't know. The deal came in way more favorable than expected, but expecting him to repeat those first 8 games, I think it's courageous.
I get that, but at the same time,
I'm not saying he can't do it. I want to be clear.
I know you're not saying. No, I know that. I like to give you a bad time, but I know that you're not saying that. But at the same time, there doesn't seem to be a real barrier that he can't. It's not like the team got worse. It's not like he got less weapons. It doesn't seem to be, any of the logical reasons. Now, if he just falls off a cliff, I guess it's possible. But I don't know. I just don't get that feeling. Brian, you were going to say something.
I'm just laughing because you're so nice, Dayna. You need to put the screws to Evan.
Evan, damn it.
It is absolutely the fact of the matter is if Geno plays well, there will be at least a meaningful portion of Evan that will be a little bit frustrated that he's playing so well.
Me?
Yes. And if yes.
You think I'll be upset that my Seahawks quarterback is dominating the division.
If he actually falls on his face, you are going to take some victory laps, and you're going to feel a little bit. Yes.
No.
Yes, you will.
I will never root against
now
my
on
own
record,
team.
everybody.
I would never root against my own team, but I will tell you this right now. Russell Wilson's going to have a better year in Denver than Geno Smith will in Seattle this year.
Fuck that. Who cares?
I'm telling you that right now. That's my hot take.
He's going to play so bad. Russell Wilson's going to play so bad that the 3rd round pick that they traded for us is going to end up a 1st round pick. That's how bad he's going to play.
I forgot that we have another one.
Denver paid a lot for a backup quarterback. I don't think that was a coincidence. Ernst Stidham got a lot of money from them.
Oh, I thought you were making a joke about Russ.
Oh, no, they paid a lot for Jared Stidham, and I think that was a message.
Wasn't it like close to 10 million or something absurd?
It was something odd. It was day one of free agency.
He needs a little heat, so that's
yeah. On the podcast I did earlier today, I had a whole take on it. The Broncos season just completely depends on whether or not Peyton and Russ mesh right away. And if they don't, it could be real ugly. But if they do, it could be great, so we'll see what happens. But it doesn't matter because he's not on our team anymore. So we don't care how well he plays because we don't have to play him. So, right? Yes. Moving on. So, yes. So, what about you, Jeff, with Geno? Do you have any reservations? I expect him actually to play a little, not necessarily better, but more consistently. Like, I don't think we're going to get those huge drop-offs just because he has another year under his belt and more time, kind of in that role where even just this time last year, there was still some question marks out there. So,
yeah, for sure. At this time last year, I thought he was going to be, I thought he'd play 4 games or something for the team and be a backup the rest of his career. But Evan made some good points. And I think his turnover level throws, there's a stat on PFF that just measures throws that should be intercepted. He had a really, really high number, especially in the second half of the year where he was admittedly forcing the ball. We've talked about this in other podcasts. A lot of the issues that he had in the second half, I think were related to interior offensive line. I think it was related to the receivers. It was related to all things they have addressed. So the thing with Geno, I think it's the biggest question other than obviously the defense. I think if you're looking as an outsider of where this franchise is going, I think this year is a huge evaluation point for him. And the way they set up the contract, they have an out after 1 year. And John talked about wanting to trade for 2024 picks in last year's draft. I think a lot of that was he wants to position himself if they want to draft that next quarterback. So this year is a huge evaluation point for him. If Geno falls flat on his face, they're going to walk away after 1 year.
Which again,
I'll talk about that for 1 second. I mean,
sure.
I know you brought this up, Dana. It's 2 scenarios. If Geno actually is as good or better this year than he was last year, what does that mean for the Seahawks? Not just next year, but in the future. Assume that he is a top 7 quarterback in the NFL.
That's unbelievable. It means they have
good,
a franchise quarterback.
I mean, is he your quarterback for the next 4 years? Do you locking in at that point?
I think we ship an enticing offer over to Denver. Do a round 2.
Here's the thing.
Round 2.
I think with Geno, I think that what it is that this contract literally is year to year. Let's see. It's not going to hurt him. It's not costing him a lot of money. They can literally take it year to year to year. But eventually, they're going to have to get a new quarterback probably within the next, 3, let's be quite honest, just because of his age, if nothing else. But I think that the way the contract sets up, for me, it just feels like they're every year, we're just going to kind of wait and see what happens.
Let me put it a different way. If he plays really well next year, is he the guy you're trying to win a Super Bowl with?
Yeah.
I think he could be.
Yeah.
He's a top 7 quarterback, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good enough, especially on that deal.
And then the opposite, if he is not good next year, you can define what that is, but he's clearly not the guy. What does that mean for the Seahawks? Does that mean Drew Lock is going to get a shot? Does it mean that they start over with someone else? What are you assuming in that scenario?
I think they'll draft a quarterback.
I think John's going to spend a lot of time studying quarterbacks this year. There's one scenario where I would not be against them completely tanking this year for Caleb.
So, can we talk about that for a second, though, Jeff? So I'm not saying it's a likely scenario, but there is a world where Seattle cannot stop the run again this year. Okay. So they get ran over defensively. Geno does not take a step. Geno regresses. They could end up with a very high pick. Unintentionally.
This is the year to have one.
I'm just saying it could. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It really
That's what I mean. That's why I'm not nervous about the season. I feel like the downside is not that unfavorable of a scenario.
Except for then we will all complain.
We will, but if they end up in a draft to get your next franchise quarterback with the rest of the roster they have in place on rookie deals, that's the Super Bowl roster Brian's been talking about for years.
Right.
So ideally, Geno plays great and you have your quarterback locked in at a great value. But I think the flip side of it's a pretty good scenario.
So is the worst case scenario that he has a season pretty much like last year that is really good in spurts and not as good in other spurts, and you've got a guy that, you know, is not clearly good enough or not clearly bad enough? Is that the worst case scenario?
Probably a little worse than that. Probably like the closer to the second half of the year, you win like 7 to 8 games. You're nowhere in the draft. Geno doesn't get better. So it's pretty much what you're saying, but slightly worse than that.
Damn, that's an interesting scenario, actually.
We'll mull it over for next time because we have to do Patreon questions. All right. These people take time. They ask these questions and we are here to answer them. We're going to start with Sean's question. Is there any chance, not including injury, that Mike Jackson starts the season at CB2 instead of Witherspoon? Jeff?
Yeah, for sure. Mike Jackson was the best player in the offseason. It would be pretty ludicrous to imagine using a 5th overall pick on a non-starter, but you're going to be in 3. You're going to be in nickel most of the time anyway, and you can just play Witherspoon in the nickel. And they were testing that out. So I do think there is a scenario where if Mike Jackson's play from the offseason carries over into camp, they want to get their best 3 guys on the field. Jamal's probably not ready to start the year, so you got Julian Love playing safety. If you're taking Kobe Bryant off the field, it's not a crazy scenario. I think it's either one of Kobe Bryant or Jackson probably coming off the field. Witherspoon's going to play one way or another. So I think I think there's scenarios where Mike Jackson is the outside corner, but I'm hoping Witherspoon wins that job.
Mm-hmm. All right. Jason asked about Shelby Harris, if he was likely coming back. And we already answered that. Brian thinks no. All right. This question's from Adam. Brian, I'm going to send this to you. How do you think the team will rotate the secondary when everyone is healthy? Diggs, Adams, Love, Woolen, Witherspoon, Jackson, and Bryant.
I think that is just going to be a almost impossible question to answer until they get into camp, because and there's other guys to mention there. Jarek Reed, who was drafted as a nickel and safety, played both in college, and there are people that are really high on him. And so you've got, let's go over the nickels for a second. You've got Julian Love, who can play nickel. You've got Kobe Bryant, who played nickel all of last year. You've got Witherspoon, who played nickel during some of the OTAs. Quandre Diggs can play nickel, but he wouldn't obviously be your nickel. Who am I missing? Jarek Reed, I guess I mentioned. So you've got a number of guys that play nickel. You've got at safety, the Jamal Adams situation is really a big open question. I'm assuming he's not going to play, but you know, you've got Julian Love and you've got Quandre Diggs. I think that there could be some surprises about who they decide to try at safety. They liked Kobe Bryant enough. He was an outside corner. They played him nickel. He does not have the physical measurables of some of these other guys. And so I'm just wondering if he's going to get pushed out at nickel. But he's also been a playmaker. So do they try to get him some reps at safety or somewhere else? So I think it's just going to be really open. And then you just talk about the corners, which we've already done. My assumption is it is going to be Witherspoon, Mike Jackson, and Reek Woolen as your starting corners, and that it's going to be Diggs and Love at safety. That's my assumption. And if it's something else, it will be interesting to see how that plays out.
All right. So, Evan, this one is going to you. It's from Rob. It's like, first question is, do you think the Hawks would consider trading one of their cornerbacks with all their current depth? And if so, who are the leading candidates to be moved in your mind?
He's not going to like my answer to that question. The answer is no. That's a position group where I don't think you can ever have enough cornerbacks. That is an insanely valuable position. And even if I were to contemplate a player that they would move, you're telling me they're not going to trade Tariq. They're not going to trade Devin Witherspoon. They're not going to trade Mike Jackson. Like maybe a Trey Brown gets shipped for something small. Brian won't like that, but I think that's a position group where keeping reinforcements is a wise decision.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So. All right. Rob's second question was about surprise cuts. So we already covered that too. All right. Jason, last year's passing game was concentrated in short and long. Does Seattle add more comprehensive intermediate game usually associated with this offense? Jeff.
Hold on, repeat that for a second. I lost that.
See, listen, you don't listen to me. No, I'm just kidding. Hold on. All right. So
tells me that every two hours. So.
Jeff was looking at pictures of Jake Bobo.
He was.
Yeah,
he really was.
I'm mesmerized by that.
All right. Jason asked, last year's passing game was concentrated in short and long. Does Seattle add more comprehensive intermediate game usually associated with this offense?
Yeah, 100%. That is one of the reasons they drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba, and he just dominates that part of the field out of the slot. And we talked about, I kind of alluded to this before. They had kind of a hole in their offense last year where they had some of the short stuff, they had the deep shots, and Geno was really, really good at hitting intermediate parts of the field. So that's one of the things he really did early in the year with tight ends. He was much better at hitting DK on conventional routes. And how many times, like during the last couple of years and early with Waldron, we're like, where is DK gone? Why is he not got a target for 4 quarters?
Mm-hmm.
We've learned that was more of a Russell issue than a Waldron or a passing offense issue. And they were really hitting just more conventional, more timing routes. And that's why I thought Smith and Jigba and that whole offseason, I thought it was a pipe dream they'd get him. But I thought he was the perfect guy to just complete the offense. They didn't really have that player. And we've been kind of, really since Doug left, they really haven't. Like Tyler Lockett can win out of the slot, and there's been guys here and there, but like if you watch like how the Patriots use Julian Edelman and what kind of that kind of player can do to like complete your offense and just be able to dominate that part of the field, that's why Smith and Jigba to me was just that perfect fit for this team, because he complemented what they have so well. So I really do expect them to be a lot better, assuming that Smith and Jigba can stay healthy and assuming he can play at this level. But all reports have been really, really good on him. It seems like he's going to transition really smoothly. And I think that's why I am encouraged by Geno. I think what that kind of player can do for a quarterback with what they can do already with Tyler and the tight ends and DK. And really the third receiver last year was Marquise Goodwin, who was more of a deep ball guy. He's not a traditional slot guy, not at all. And Eskridge was not been able to stay on the field. So they, like the end of the year, if you look, they were playing like Kay Johnson on third down. And he's probably like their 8th receiver right now. And they were playing Laquan Treadwell. That game Tyler Lockett got injured, Laquan Treadwell was playing like 2 receiver sets. I don't know why I remember this. My brain is weird. But having Smith and Jigba, who could have been a top 10 pick in most draft classes, assuming he was healthy, that changes their whole intermediate passing game. And that's why everyone's so high on what this offense could be.
I got to jump in on that too, because I think people forget that DK Metcalf punished the 49ers in the playoffs in that playoff game. I mean, they did not have a good answer for him, and their secondary, their corner position did not improve. And that was already a weakness for them last year. And now Tyler Lockett already had been a player that was hard for them to deal with, and that he'd had a lot of success against them. And now you're going to add in JSN, who, I don't know, like we haven't had this debate yet. I think he might be the guy that leads the team in receptions. I think it's possible that he will become Geno's favorite target, his go-to target, his most, reliable, person to dump the ball off to. And that doesn't even include the fact that I think both running backs are going to be potential receiving threats as well. I mean, the 49ers' biggest strength has been their pass rush. And if the Seahawks offensive line can hold up even a little bit, I think the 49ers' weakness has been some of their coverage ability. And I think the Seahawks have everything that you need from a weapon standpoint to give them and everyone else major headache.
Mm-hmm. I want to answer Jen's question in the chat. Jen, about your question about the running backs. Yes. Okay. So let's go here. Evan, this one's for you. It's from Ian. What do you think Noah Fant's future in Seattle looks like? Will we re-sign him after this season? Let him walk, trade him during the season, considering the depth that they have at tight end?
That's a good question. They're spending a lot of money on the position. You know, they're spending, what is it? I think a combined like mid-teens, high teens on the just between two players, Will Dissly and Noah Fant. I think a lot is riding on this year and what Noah Fant's contract expectations will be next year. Obviously, he's a unrestricted free agent after this year. He's going to be entering age 27. So he hasn't been in the league that long. Remember, he was a first-round pick in 2019. So I think a lot is riding on this year, but I have a hard time seeing them, you know, justifying any sort of significant salary increases towards him. So he's not a priority in my mind.
Fair. All right. One more, Brian. This one's for you. It's from Mark. It says, do you think there's a world where we don't extend Nwosu and go with the other edges next year? Or would Nwosu become a tag and a trade candidate if he has a great season?
This is an interesting question. To some extent, you would have expected them to extend Nwosu already to create cap space, and they haven't done that. The longer they go without doing that, the more it leaves the question of whether he's part of their long-term plans. Because you don't generally let edge rushers that have double-digit sacks, especially if he does it back-to-back years, reach free agency. And I don't think you can make the case, even if he has a good year again, that he's a franchise tag guy. Like, he's not that good of an edge rusher. So I don't know. I think they've got a couple gambles here. Darrell Taylor, who's I think people forget because he missed a year as a rookie, he will be a restricted free agent, even though this is his fourth year. He will not be someone who the Seahawks have to like lose after this season. They have some flexibility there with Boye Mafe and with Derek Hall and Darrell Taylor. They might want to see what they have before they make that call. And if those guys all play out, then they might let Nwosu walk. It's hard to see that right now because he was arguably the best player on the defense last year. A very, very shitty defense, but he was the best player on it. So I don't know. I could go on that because I also have questions about how the scheme's going to adjust this year. I think he's the most scheme-dependent player on the roster on the defensive side. And if they end up deciding to go back more to 4-3, I don't know if he really profiles as someone that can play Leo. So there's a lot of open questions that make that a hard question. There's a lot of open issues that make that a hard question to answer.
Well, that is it for our Patreon questions. I want to thank everyone who submitted one. If you guys want to be able to, send us in Patreon questions, go to patreon.com/hawkblogger, join. You get instant access to the Slack channel, which is a fantastic conversation. I swear the conversations on there kept me going through the off season. You guys are so smart and so good. It was really fun. So I encourage everyone to do that. Evan, you raised your hand.
I cannot believe we didn't even talk about the KJ Wright stuff.
Oh,
I think we got to talk about that. I think we got to
episode.
We need a real
talk about the running back thing a little bit.
We need a real hawk.
No, I just told Jen we weren't going to.
Oh, really? All right.
No. We can. It's fine.
I'm just saying we need a real hawk talk after dark. Like
what happened? I'm gonna admit it. He had a thing with Golden Tate on there.
He's a pot stirrer. That's all
What happened?
Yeah.
Which episode? There's been a lot.
Tell me. Well, give me the greatest hits. What's going on?
So here, I'll read some quotes for you. How about that? I won't even interpret anything. I'll just repeat what was said. Okay. Here's what Golden Tate said. There was a rumor out there that I was not coming back to the Seahawks because of Ashton, Russell's former wife, Russell's ex-wife at the time, had an affair with me, which was completely not true. In fact, my now wife, Elisa Tate, and Ashton were best friends and still really good friends. Russell and I had conversations about his future in regards to that. So when I heard that, I was kind of creative and kind of funny, but it picked up stream. I felt like I was never defended properly. It kind of made me angry because now everyone's just coming at me completely sideways and I'm not being defended. It was a whole big situation. I felt like a scapegoat in many ways. I was bitter for years, y'all, years. KJ goes on to say, like, I don't want to go viral with this. I really don't. A few dudes come on here, off the record and on the record, and have said what they've said or how they felt about number 3. So when you play the game, and I'm quoting, when you go through this journey, it's all about the brothers. It's all about the brotherhood. And when it's all said and done, he's got a lot of making up to do. He's got a lot of phone calls to make. A lot of, hey, bro, I should have done better with that. And that's the God honest truth. I couldn't hold that inside, but he's got a lot of making up to do. End quote.
Why would Russell Wilson give 2 shits if KJ Wright wants an apology? I just don't get it. I don't. He's such a potster. It's driving me crazy.
Does it really drive you crazy?
It's just annoying. It's just like, meh, 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 meh. It's like, little ladies around a teapot. I can't hack it.
Weren't they both at Tyler Lockett's wedding like the day before?
The day before.
Like together.
Oh, yeah.
In a picture.
But wait,
it's like so awkward to
Don't you guys either within your families or at work have like your group that you're close to, and then you just have some people that just drive you crazy and you talk about, like, doesn't that just come up for you, or you have never been in that situation where you're
of
just
course. I fucking love the tea. Of course.
Right? So imagine.
But not in front of thousands of people on a podcast when it's not necessary.
Like,
why? That's gonna get
under
more
the
people
microscope where there's fame, fortune, all the stuff going on. It's a team game, and there's an equal amount of effort, hopefully, but an unequal amount of reward and attention and recognition. Mm-hmm. And when you have that going on, knowing how much you're giving physically and emotionally and all this other stuff, and then for the person that is unevenly, partially due to the position, maybe partially due to other reasons, getting like the lion's share of the money, the lion's share of the recognition and the fame, getting with the famous wife, all this kind of stuff, that person is also then not more generous and more of a giver to the other guys in the locker room. I can imagine that would be pretty frustrating. And then especially if that peaks at a point where that player is claiming that the reason that they're not winning more is because he's not getting more, and that the actual reason they're not winning more is because he's getting more. And that you're one of the best defenses that's ever played in the history of the game, and he's not even one of the best quarterbacks that's played in the history of the game, or even he hasn't even been the best quarterback in the league during his era. I could understand why there's a lot of bitterness and frustration. This is their whole life. They don't have something else. They're not like going on to be like, something else. This was their life. So I can imagine that a lot of that's hard to just let go of. No?
I just think it's tacky to talk about it in
fair.
front of but I have issue with KJ Wright. You guys know I do. He drives me insane anyway. I mean, he's a fine person and whatever. But I struggle with, it's like, Russ is gone now. Can we just, Evan even said it, just move on.
But the whole show is revisiting all his guests are from the 20.
Yeah, that's true.
Really,
at least Sherm stays current, for God's sake.
But all his guests are Averill, Luke Wilson, they're all from that team. They're not talking about the 2023 Seahawks.
That's fair.
One thing to keep in mind, he is just starting his media career, and he has an incentive to generate these clicks, right? To generate this interest. So I do agree to an extent, though, Dayna, it is tacky. But to me, it's like, I just want these guys to be good with each other, because like that to me, being like a Seahawks fan is even just a sports fan is like such a special time in my life. I want these guys to be good with each other. You know what I mean? I want this to be like a fairy tale ending. And
But isn't that what he's asking for? I mean, that's what seems like he's asking for. He wants to be good, and what he's asking for that is for Russell to acknowledge where he wasn't good before and where he wasn't a good teammate.
But why would you expect that while he's still playing? He's not going to go back and say, "You're right. It was all the defense. I wasn't all that good. Sorry, but I'm going to go play this game on Sunday." Like, that's illogical. It just irritates me.
We don't know the reality is we don't have the full information to know what's gone on behind the scenes. And KJ's also being super vague, right? Like, these are not like super specific attacks or anything. It's like he's just saying he needs to make phone calls and stuff. Like, it's very hard for, I feel like, any of us to have a nuanced conversation around this because there's just so much lacking detail. I don't know.
And the thing is, like, Golden Tate was on, I think it was Monday. He's been consistent with his point the whole time.
That's true.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
The whole thing is, he got a little more in depth that he said he was really bitter towards Russell even after he left Seattle.
Yeah.
And he said, like, he would be on road games and fans would be yelling at his family that he slept with fashion and things like that.
I mean, you guys know that it was down to Golden or Doug. Like, there was a decision the front office had to make: keep one or keep the other. And I think about that sometimes, how the Seahawks fortunes might have been different, not necessarily better or worse. I don't know. But, like, if they had kept Golden instead of Doug, I really wonder if that would have changed anything one way or another. They're very different players, but they're all very different people and personalities. And I don't know. I think they made the right choice. Obviously, I'm pretty biased, but I got to know both those guys. I like both of them quite a bit. But they had to make that choice because of the Percy Harvin deal.
Yeah, I was going to say, the Percy Harvin trade arguably cost them the second Super Bowl.
All right. If they hadn't made that trade, I don't think Golden goes anywhere. And I think Golden was such a great fit with Russell in terms of how, and a good compliment to Doug. And then Curse, like, they had this really good thing going. I think it's an underrated part of the Seahawks story about Golden Tate leaving and becoming a Pro Bowl receiver elsewhere.
I just hope these guys can work it out behind the scenes. That's all.
I don't
They
think they ever will.
You don't think they will?
They will, maybe in like 20 years.
I think they'll kind of publicly patch things together, but I think it's what Brian said. I think they will always hold him in, like, they'll always resent him based on the attention and the way that Seahawks. Like, look how many players came out for that first game to kind of. I think they'll always hold him as kind of the thing that held the team back, and the way he was talked about, and he's just not. I think they'll always have that resentment for him. Maybe they'll patch things up a little bit, but I really agree with what Brian was saying before.
That makes me
I don't think Russ has the tools to patch this up. I don't think he is. I just don't.
That could be. I kind of agree with that.
I don't think he has the EQ to be able to do it. And
does he have an avoidant attachment style? Is that what it is?
What the hell you're talking about?
I know personality styles. I know exactly what an avoidant
exactly.
Is. Oh no, I know. I don't know if I want to know the answer to that, but yeah, I don't know. Old age, they're
going to start getting in the Hall of Fame, and they're going to start, and then they're going to get all sentimental, and eventually they'll in the ring. It'll be fine.
Super Bowl, it's just such a black cloud over the whole thing.
I hope NFL Films does a whole thing on it, or ESPN.
That's just as they're going to maybe come back. There'll be a 30 for 30 on it. And it's going to be brutal.
Right.
It's
going to be so fun.
The group chats are going to be lit.
I mean, you guys got it.
Yeah.
Last year, Russ gets traded, and the difference in terms of player involvement from like old Seahawks coming to training camp, to practices, to games, being around the team. Doug's now doing like the Seahawks sound or whatever.
Yeah, the voiceover.
Right. Like the amount of involvement from Seahawks alumni from that era, night and day, overnight. The only change is Russ leaving. I mean, it runs deep with that group.
Yeah, and Richard Sherman might be getting a job with Skip Bayless. So,
what?
Yes.
Did you guys see that?
I did. I had a meltdown.
Well, Shannon Sharp left that show, and apparently Sherman is a front runner. And meeting with him, and
for
he's
first
on
take?
every day 3 hours screaming takes. That is going to come up a lot this year.
That could actually be the first person who could take down Skip Bayless.
I'm like, I'm in for that show.
It's so funny that full circle.
You remember when he was on and destroyed Bayless?
Yeah.
I mean,
That
he
was like his
destroyed
breakout moment.
him.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. There's so much drama with those boys. It's kind of fun, but at the same time, I'm like,
Well, it's funny. A couple of them, like Cliff was on KJ's show and was really
that was really good.
Russell, actually.
Yeah. I just like Cliff. I that was a great show. He's had a couple great shows. I saw in the comments somewhere that someone's like, I hope he brings Marshawn on. Me too.
Doesn't Mike B love Russell too? Michael Bennett?
He doesn't love him, but he's defended him.
Yeah.
But like Luke Wilson was on there, and I've heard that he wasn't a big fan of him either. And
that was pretty surprising. Like everyone talks about the LOB not liking him, and Luke being one of the most beloved, like happy-go-lucky guys, and he was pretty harsh.
I've heard over the years that he was not big on him. Because
could someone explain to me why all of a sudden that the running back thing has become a conversation? I read on
Twitter.
I read the tweets.
No,
I understand. Like there's a tweet from I think it was Matt Miller about the plan for running backs is that you draft one and then you franchise tag them once and then you draft another. And all the running backs like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs all quote tweeted it saying that they don't appreciate us and we'll just leave and we'll take our ball and go home.
Well, none of them got paid. None of them have gotten a deal.
Three players, Brian. There's 3 players that were left in the franchise tag dedeadline, and they all had until
all
Monday.
3 are running backs.
There was Saquon, Josh Jacobs, and I think it was Tony Pollard.
Yes,
and
those were the 3.
None of them, no, a single one of them, even were close apparently in their negotiations.
But why is this a debate? Like, I mean, this seems like such old news.
I know, and that's why it's funny, but it's because of the timing that it was just them 3, and Saquon's like the high-profile running back. I think that kind of just like set the media off, and then the players got all upset.
Plus, also keep in mind, there's nothing else to talk about right now.
That's probably more it, Dayna.
No, but it does seem like the NFL has really come and changed that in the last few years. And I know that would probably make Nathan the happiest person on this show, but it seems like there has been a progressive change in the league where they've really stopped paying running backs, and that's something new.
I think that there's some other less talked about position value changes in the NFL in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Like middle linebacker.
That's why
I think has been massively devalued, in general. I think that kicker has actually increased, like the amount of people that are willing to pay a kicker.
Jason Myers with his little.
I'm not saying it's a good thing.
You remember his little postseason image? Remember?
I remember, Evan. You don't have to. You can extend your fingers later. I mean, I know you're always worried about our friendly family rating on this show with your language, but God forbid you use the fingers.
I have morals, okay?
I know. Yeah. I mean, tight end, other than the top couple, is tight end a position that really is getting a lot of money? Like, it seems to me like the story in the NFL is that a few positions have become ultra valued, and
quarterback,
everything else, quarterback, edge rusher, cornerback, receiver
shot it like crazy,
have become like the positions, and everything else I feel like is receded.
And
even offensive line,
safety's also gone way down.
What's that?
Safety's also been really devalued.
I can't believe center is so. I mean, center is valued less than running backs. And I don't know. You know me about centers. We won't go there. But anyway, the running back thing is just weird to me. It seems so obvious. It's been that way for decades as far as I'm concerned. Draft a young running back. Maybe sign him to a second contract, never sign him to a third, and then go back. I mean, that's just the way.
I think the problem is, and I think a lot of the media people are getting behind it. Like you see Rich Eisen saying, I think it was Rich Eisen that said you can't have a dynasty without a running back, and you can't. And then Steve Weish comes out and he says, that they put their bodies on the line because they have to do double duty. They have to pass block and run and catch sometimes. And so I think that I think that there are these people coming to them and saying they are a valuable part, and you guys are turning them over, as quick as you can. And now there's less and less college kids, of course, who want to be a running back because you're not going to make the money in it. They all want to be, wide receivers or quarterbacks. And so it's like, I think that the hubbub about it is that it's Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, who had an amazing year last year. Mm-hmm. And so instead of it just being, Joe Bob Jr. down the way, it's some bigger names this year. And honest to God, Saquon Barkley saved Daniel Jones's ass last year. And so I think I think that's part of it.
That makes sense. I mean, I understand why the running backs are pissed about it. And yes, Jen, I saw your tweet about Creed. I see everybody's tweets about Creed. Yes, I never miss any of them. Thank you for making my day a little bit worse. I appreciate it. So if you're a player and you're watching, and I saw that they're like, hey, how's a third wide receiver getting paid more? You see the quarterbacks like, Daniel Jones in New York getting paid $40 million a year to be a totally mediocre quarterback, and you can't even get $8 million to be a running back or whatever, and you're taking more punishment. I get it. It sucks. I also think running back's one of the coolest positions in the NFL. Like, it's fun. Barry Sanders, like, there's been amazing running backs to watch. But it is what it is. Like, don't play the position, play something else. Anyway.
I opened up a whole can of worms with the KJ stuff.
Shocking. Shocking that is that you would open a whole can of worms.
I don't think you tried to that. I think it was an honest question.
I agree. It was, I don't know. We'll see. But all right. I think that's it, Brian.
Well, thank you. You proved yourself right and me wrong, which is always fun. There was plenty to talk about. It's also just good to see everybody. If you haven't given the show a like already, please do. Appreciate that. Go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up for immediate access to the Slack channel. Follow everybody here on Twitter and on Threads if you can find them, at Hawkblogger for me, at Evan Hill HB, at Dayna OG, at Real Jeff Simmons, and follow at Real Hawk Talk as well to know when we have new shows coming out. And so we are how far away from training camp?
1 week.
I think a week.
Next week.
Yeah. Like I think 15 teams or something like that started today.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So we will be having a lot more to discuss. I think first things on that list are going to be who shows up and actually practices. I mean, is anybody going to be on that PUP list that we are surprised about and unhappy about? Is there anybody that's off of that PUP list that we're shocked about? Those are going to be where things start. And then it will go from there into here's why Jake Bobo is going to be the best receiver in Seahawks history. Here is Drew Lock really going to find a way to unseat Geno Smith. There's going to be all sorts of funny storylines to follow, and looking forward to all of them and sharing all of them with you. Thank you to Dayna, Evan, Jeff for coming on tonight. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We will see you soon. Go Hawks.